I keep using the word important, important, important. And I think every one of the slides are absolutely important, especially if we want to get these projects right. But this says this is the most important point, and I cannot emphasize, this is going to be what I call the money maker or the money breaker. And as I mentioned earlier, HVAC forensics is quite a bit of my consulting. I'd say it's about 25% of the total consulting time right now. One of the projects is actually over a year now, because of finger pointing, is actually now going to the lawyers, which is never where you want to see a project to go. And where it started is with the architect saying to the pharmacy, oh, I understand how to build clean rooms. And what they did is they spec'd in what's called a single stage compressor unit. Now, a single stage compressor unit is exactly what you have at your house, or if you're in a small strip mall or any type of commercial strip mall, you have what's called a single stage compressor. That means that when the thermostat reaches that design point or that set point, let's say that you're running at 71 degrees today, and when that thermostat hits 71, it detects that the environment is 71, it sends a signal back to the air handler that the compressor can cut off. When the compressor cuts off, to stop managing the temperature, it also stops managing the humidity. Because here's what happens is that humidity, says it right here, humidity control is only a byproduct of temperature control. So if you've got a standard single stage DX compressor unit that cycles on, cycles off, cycles on, cycles off, now you've lost control of your humidity. But you got to understand that the DX unit, the single stage, was only meant to control temperature. So during April, starting in April, May, June, July, August, I start getting these phone calls. Brian, we cannot maintain our temperature and our humidity, mostly our humidity standards in our clean room. Now, so I say, first question, what does your SOP say as an excursion event? So if you don't have an SOP that talks about excursion events on your clean room, you probably need to write one. An excursion event means that when our clean room, and this is kind of how it states on the SOP, when our clean room reaches 73 degrees and or 65% relative humidity, we have to stop compounding, because that is an excursion on our clean room, and it's no longer within a specification for us to be compounding inside of that. Now, what happens when you stop compounding? Patient care struggles, and you're not making any money. So now let's kind of flash forward over to, or step sideways over to these blue boxes called the modulating compressor. Some people will call it a dual stage compressor, some call it a digital scroll compressor, but it is a modulating compressor. And the compressor, and the cool thing is that it reads both temperature and humidity as independent variables. And now, why is that important? Well, before I get into, well, I've already stated what USP 797 says, but let me talk briefly about the natural laws of physics. Pressure goes from high to low. It's higher outside of the space than it is inside of a clean room. A clean room is 0.02 inches positive on the non-hazardous side and 0.01 inches negative. So it's a very small, minor air pressure, as opposed to, say, like the barometric pressure outside, which is much heavier. So pressure goes from high to low. Warm air is attracted to cold air. And what is the temperature inside of our clean rooms after I've got on a rear tying gown, double shoe covers, double gloves, hair bouffant, and mask? Or if you're in some of your clean rooms, maybe you're wearing a Tyvek suit. Well, I want that room to be about 64, 65 degrees is what I want that room to be at if I'm in there working for employee comfort. And then moisture, all moisture is attracted to dry air. So let's think about what we just said. A clean room is a low pressure, cold box with dry air. That means that natural laws of physics, we just created a virtual sponge for all external factors trying to get into it. So your clean room, due to the air changes, due to the air handling, due to the engineering, is always trying to fight off those natural laws of physics. So if I were having a conversation with an engineer right now, I would say, you need to target on the design criteria of your dedicated makeup air unit for this clean room, 65 degrees Fahrenheit at 50% relative humidity. That is your design. Now, when engineers are designing specifications for a makeup air unit, they also have access to what's called a psychrometric chart. And that is a cool word. Sometimes we just call it a psych chart as a shorter terminology. But as you start to move on that psych chart closer beyond the parameters, you start to hit what's called the saturation point. At that saturation point, the system, the compressors, can no longer wring out the moisture. And I'm in South Carolina. I don't know if you can tell by the really cool Southern accent that I got, but here in the South, we have a lot of hot, moist times, especially right now, even though it is going into, it's late September, it's still quite warm here, right? So our clean rooms would essentially still be fighting off some of that moisture, some of that humidity outside. Now, if you live in a mild area, hey, good for you, but there's still a lot of places around the US that have extreme temperatures, lows and highs, as well as rainy seasons and monsoon seasons and all these things. So I cannot emphasize enough that if you don't want your lawyers to end up getting involved because your clean room cannot meet temperature and humidity, the architect blew it, the engineer blew it, the HVAC contractor blew it, and everybody in the chain said, oh no, we've got experience with clean rooms. That's why it's important that all along the way, that communication with USP standards is absolutely and unequivocally key. So I spent the most amount of time on this slide. I'm going to give you that last part of bad news, Brian. These red boxes, you'll get this installed for, I don't know, $15,000 to $20,000 for your clean room. Love it, perfect. 15 to 20, we can absorb that into the budget. These blue boxes are going to go 40 to 60,000. So I just went 2.5x on the budget to go from a single stage compressor to a modulating compressor that reads humidity and temperature as independent variables. So the question is this: do you want your clean room and or your controlled or critical environments or your negative pressure rooms to have an uptime of 97 to 98% and not hit an excursion event? The answer is obviously yes. The question is can your budget absorb 2.5x? And I've actually had some smaller pharmacies that said to me, Brian, we don't see a $40,000 makeup air unit going into this space. It's not part of our budget. To which I say, I certainly understand it. It's your money, it's your pocketbook. But the reality is that if you do not want your clean room to fall out of spec, number one, your engineer's got to design it correct. But number two, you really need to consider the modulating compressor, temperature and humidity as separate factors.